Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Beyond the Whistle, episode 2. It's December 19th, 2016. Scotty, the NFL playoffs are right around the corner, as are the college football playoffs. We got a lot to talk about. How's it going?
It's going well, Matt.
All right, so we're going to start with the college football playoffs. Obviously, a few weeks ago, the committee came out with their 4 teams. It'll be number 1, Alabama versus number 4, Washington, number 2, Clemson versus number 3, Ohio State. So, Scotty, let's start with the closer game, Clemson-Ohio State. What are your predictions for that one?
Well, this is going to be an interesting one. We have 2 teams that have established a legacy with Urban Meyer and Dabo Swinney in Clemson. These are teams that have been contenders the last 2 years. Clemson obviously will be given the advantage due to Deshaun Jackson and their quarterback and their offense. But I have to go with Ohio State. I think Urban Meyer will find a way to pull out this one.
Yeah, I think you meant to say Deshaun.
Yeah.
But Deshaun Watson, I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, as is Ohio State's J.T. Barrett. So it's going to be a very good quarterback matchup with those two. Watson has the edge in passing yards. He's thrown for just close to 400 yards, while Barrett's just at about 2,428, The completion percentages are there. The touchdowns are there. Watson has a few more touchdowns, while Barrett's turned the ball over a few less times. Watson is a much better passer, while Barrett's better with his legs. The 2 X factors in this game, I think, is going to be the Clemson running back Wayne Gallman, who has consecutive 1,000-yard rushing seasons for the Tigers. And it's going to come down to him versus the star linebacking duo of Jerome Baker and Raekwon McMillan of Ohio State. What they need to do, they need to contain him and make Clemson's offense one-dimensional. And that way, if Deshaun Watson has to carry the entire game on his arm, it's going to be much easier for the Ohio State defense to try and get a pass rush after him. Moving on to Alabama versus Washington. Washington heading into the season, not many teams saw them in the playoffs. Alabama, anybody with their right mind could have predicted they'd be here. How's this game going to go down?
I think we can all predict this is going to be an Alabama victory. They're going to get back to the national championship. It's going to be a W, and I don't think it'll be much of a challenge for Nick Saban. This should be a routine victory for him, and I don't think there's much discussion on it.
Yeah, I'm taking Alabama. I think Alabama is going to win the national title this year, led by Nick Saban. I think they're hands down the best team in the country, and I don't think it's up for debate. However, Washington's not a shabby team by any means. They had a fantastic season, and their X factor, the Huskies' X factor, is going to be quarterback Jake Browning, who was really in the Heisman discussion for much of the year. He's a very good player. However, going up against this Alabama defensive front, led by all these NFL talents and all these 5-star players, specifically defensive tackle Jonathan Allen, it's going to be big for him because he's going to be able to try and eliminate the run game as best as he can. And I think Browning is going to have to try and do too much against too good of a defense. So I think Alabama is going to win this one easily, especially with the offense. I think Jalen Hurts is a very dynamic quarterback. He can run the ball. 2 strong receivers on the outside in Calvin Ridley and Ardarius Stewart. And who would want to bet against Nick Saban? He's going for his 5th national title since 2009, which is just unbelievable if you think about it. One of the best coaches in the modern sports era, you can make a case. So I'm taking Alabama. Now we're going to move on to some professional football. Scotty and I are very big on. So we're going to start with the AFC. Obviously, my New England Patriots with a big win yesterday in Denver, a game they really needed to win. They won 16-3. They're the top seed in the AFC. Scotty, look at this AFC playoff picture for me. Who do you think is going to be able to make the playoffs, and just really what's going through your mind when it comes to the AFC?
So I take a look at the AFC playoff picture, and my biggest factor I see is Tennessee Titans. This is a team no one could have expected. Marcus Mariota is unarguably a top 10 quarterback this year. He has led this team. DeMarco Murray is having a revitalization of his career, and I'm very impressed with this Titans team. They're still in it. Houston's offense is terrible, and it's unfair to Bill O'Brien because their defense is so good, even without J.J. Watt. Jadeveon Clowney's stepping up, and I think the Titans will find a way to get into the playoffs this year. Looking at the Steelers, they've been hot. Le'Veon Bell is carrying the load. But the one thing I take away from it is Ben Roethlisberger is not being asked to put everything on his shoulders. That Buffalo Bills game, he had statistically the worst game of his career, 3 interceptions. But because of Le'Veon Bell, over 200 all-purpose yards, they were able to pull it out, and that's going to be the X factor for the Steelers down the stretch.
Yeah, I like how you talked about the Tennessee team. Tennessee's a very intriguing team to me because obviously you mentioned Marcus Mariota. He's a very dynamic young quarterback, and we watched his partner in crime, you could sort of say the same draft class, and Jameis Winston last night, although Tampa did not win, they impressed me, but we're going to get to the NFC next. I think Mariota this season has really proved that he's a baller. I mean, he can really play. And whether it's with his feet, he can make a lot of plays. And yesterday afternoon, going into Kansas City in Arrowhead, a very tough place to play, coming away with a win. I think that's the first step towards the future of Tennessee. I don't know that this year, I think they're getting hot too late, and I don't know that there's enough time for them to really put something together. They still have a very good shot at making the playoffs. I don't see them getting in this year. I see Houston taking that division. You talked about Houston. They've got a good defense. Yesterday, when Coach O'Brien put their $17 million a year man, Brock Osweiler, on the bench and Tom Savage came in, Houston looked good. Obviously, they're playing Jacksonville, an inferior opponent, and they didn't look great, frankly, because I don't think they're that good of a team. But they have talent, they have good coaching, and I think that benching Osweiler was the best thing to happen to this team because there was so much hype surrounding this guy, and it's such a mental game where he's thinking he needs to go out every day and play up to his contract. And really, I think the contract might have ruined his career in the sense that he's always going to have the weight of that contract on his shoulders, unlike a guy like Tom Savage who said, I'm nothing much more than a backup. I just need to come in, make some throws, do my things. They have talent. They have Lamar Miller, Alfred Blue, DeAndre Hopkins. He's just got to get the ball in those guys' hands and hope that something happens. I think they're winning that division, and I don't see him going very far in the playoffs, but I think that division's theirs.
And back to Houston, Tom Savage is no scrub. He played at Pitt. He was a 3-year starter. He really made an impact on that team, and he brought that college franchise all the way up. I think Tom Savage showed it in college, and he could be more than a backup in the NFL, but obviously it's too early to see. Then one more thing is Kansas City, Andy Reid's mismanagement of timeouts. We see it every year.
Yep, every year.
Every year with him. In the playoffs, we see it. And he hurt that game. He cost his team a loss in Kansas City versus Tennessee. And it's a real question going into the playoffs. You're going to face a lot of great head coaches, a lot of good coaches. You got Jack Del Rio, you got Bill Belichick. What are you going to do with Andy Reid, who could really be a factor in them losing?
Yeah, so now we're going to look at the spots that are open for grab. Really the biggest overall prize. Oakland and New England are going to compete for the number 1 overall seed. Pittsburgh and Baltimore are probably going to fight. Like this Sunday is essentially the AFC North Championship. Winner of that game is probably going to have the 3rd seed in the AFC. If Tennessee, like we talked about, can maybe squeeze their way into 4, I think that's Houston's spot. And then you got number 6, Miami, and Denver. Who's going to grab that last wild card spot? So personally, I think Miami's going to make the playoffs, and here's why. Denver's got a very tough schedule down the stretch. They have Oakland and Kansas City in Arrowhead, too, which makes it very difficult. And the thing about Miami, their schedule, they finished their regular season against New England. However, I think New England is going to lock up the number 1 seed before Week 17, and Miami's going to play Jimmy Garoppolo in the backups. We've seen Jimmy Garoppolo can play pretty well, but how well can he play with backups surrounding him, especially on defense, resting the starters, and really just being content with the number 1 overall seed at that point and not trying to do anything else. Pittsburgh versus Baltimore. This is a game that's very close to you. Very intriguing matchup this Sunday. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'm going to be in Pittsburgh at 4:25 to watch this game. And this is going to be a great one. It's very hard for any team in the AFC North to sweep a season series, unless it's the Cleveland Browns, obviously. But the Steelers, this is a must-win game. If they lose this game, they go into Week 17 playing the Browns, which you'd assume is a win. But they'll really put themselves back if they lose this game. They lost the first game in Week 9, so the Ravens hold the tiebreaker. So even if the Steelers win this game, they will have the 1-game advantage and they'll have to beat Cleveland. I think this game is going to be a close battle. Joe Flacco has turned it on recently, but we saw the Eagles struggle last week versus a cold Philadelphia team, which really could be an indicator of this hot team might be going south.
Yeah, I'm going to take Pittsburgh in this one, but as a football fan, I mean, as someone, obviously, for a Steelers and Ravens fan, it's a very stressful game, and it's one where you're on the edge of your seat all game. As a pure football fan, without my team playing in the game, I love watching this. It's either two of the best franchises in the NFL. They go at it every time they play. It doesn't matter if one team's good, if one team's bad. We're fortunate enough that both teams are good and both teams are fighting for a playoff spot. I'm going to take Pittsburgh because of how well Le'Veon Bell has been playing down the stretch. I think he's a possible MVP candidate. Another thing we're going to get to soon. But the weapons on Pittsburgh is just way too much for Baltimore. Their defense is nothing more than good. And if you can limit Terrell Suggs, which New England was able to do in that game that I watched, they were able to go after the Baltimore defense. And there's a lot of mishaps in coverage down the field. Chris Hogan, for example, in that game got wide open down the field. So you have Antonio Brown down the field. You got Ladarius Green or Jesse James, whoever up the middle at the tight end spot, handing the ball off to Le'Veon Bell. There's just way too many options for this less than stellar Baltimore defense to try and deal with. So we're going to ship off to the NFC now, where last night Dallas hung on to that number 1 spot. Not that they were going to lose it, but they moved to 12-2, taking on Tampa Bay. Scotty, same thing. NFC, what stands out? Who you like?
I like the Cowboys, obviously. Dak Prescott, second best completion percentage in NFL history last night. He doesn't need to do everything. He doesn't need to throw 400 yards and 3 touchdowns a game for the Cowboys. He poses the running threat. He had 4 rushing attempts for 20 yards and a touchdown. And he's led by Ezekiel Elliott, probably the best running back in the NFL right now. If the defense can come up and Orlando Scandrick, if Maurice Claiborne, all of them can come up and make a big impact, Sean Lee especially, I think the Cowboys can run through it this year. And this is looking like the Cowboys of the 1990s.
Yeah, I think the Cowboys right now, I think the number 1 seed. They've clinched that at this point in my eyes. I don't see them falling apart down the stretch. But the NFC is very interesting at this point because there's really not, in the AFC, you got a lot of teams that might put a nice run together, but they're not serious playoff teams. Here in the NFC, every team on this board right now is a team that I think has potential to go far into the playoffs, some further than others. Washington at 6 is a team, you and I, Scotty, we both really like Washington. We're both big on Kirk Cousins. I think Dallas has the number 1. I'd be concerned if I were Dallas because they would have to take on possibly Detroit, possibly Atlanta, New York, Washington. There's not a good matchup for them on that board. And speaking of Atlanta, they're one of the hottest teams in the NFL right now, led by Matt Ryan, who's playing as good as football as anybody, and they've been doing it without Julio Jones the last few weeks. So they're a dangerous team. Unfortunately, they're not a team that I really trust in the playoffs, but the team on there that I'm huge on there are 2. New York Giants right now are not a team you want to be messing with. We've seen this before in 2011, 2007. Eli leading a decent team, we thought at the beginning of the year. They get hot at the end and they make a run at the Super Bowl. And Green Bay, a team that you and I on this show said their season was essentially over. Aaron Rodgers said, hey, we might be able to run the table. 4 games later, 4-0. They're in a spot where if they win out, they're in the playoffs. So if you had to pick one of these teams right now to win the entire NFC, which team would that be?
I think it's got to be the Giants, actually. I'm going to go with the G-Men for this one. Eli Manning is probably the most experienced playoff quarterback out of any of these quarterbacks in the NFC. Only one to win a Super Bowl besides Russell Wilson. And he's made an impact, and he has had a disappointing regular season, to say the least. But this defense led by Damian Harrison, Olivier Vernon, even without Jason Pierre-Paul, this is still a scary defense to go against. And with all of these offensive-minded teams, I would be scared to play the New York Giants, and I think they could get back to the Super Bowl.
Okay, so now looking at the NFC, and let's even look at the AFC a little bit here. You had to pick a team who's hot right now and who's not hot right now, and teams that are getting hot at the right time, not at the right time. Who would those be for you?
So my team that's hot is the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yep.
They've got it going, 5 straight wins, a couple of disappointing losses, lost to the Dolphins, lost to the Eagles. Now they're coming back, they're coming in strong, and they look like an AFC contender. They look like the Super Bowl contender coming into the season. Everyone said, oh, this offense, oh, Martavis Bryant, Le'Veon Bell. We know in the NFL, pieces don't always work out as expected, but this team has rebounded through Sammy Coates bringing 2 fingers, pretty much no wide receivers behind Antonio Brown. They've carried the load. This is my hot team, and I think they can make a run. For my cold team, I think you got to go with the Minnesota Vikings. We were all talking about after Week 5, they started undefeated. This could be a team to win it. How good was the Sam Bradford trade? The Vikings could run the table. They could get to the playoffs. They could win the division. That isn't how it worked out. The Vikings stand at 7-7 right now, a mediocre record, obviously. They've lost a couple big ones recently, and even with the return of Adrian Peterson, this team is not hot, and they've taken a step backwards. And also with the fact that Teddy Bridgewater may not be ready for the start of the season next year, it could play a huge impact. Adrian Peterson might be let go next year. This team is taking a turn for the worse.
Yeah, my team that's hot, I hate to say it as a Patriots fan, but the New York Giants, they're as hot as any team in the NFL right now. Eli Manning is one of the most, even though he's got 2 Super Bowl rings, he's one of the most underrated players of our generation. I think he's been an Iron Man. He hasn't missed a snap his career. So The Giants, led by Eli Manning, he's got Odell Beckham, Sterling Shepard, Victor Cruz. He's got weapons, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. This Giants defense is one that's not to be messed with. They're without Jason Pierre-Paul. Might be back at the end of the year. We're not sure. But the guy they call Jackrabbit, Janoris Jenkins, he got hurt yesterday. Ian Rappaport says he's going to be all right. He's one of the most dynamic players in the NFL. He's a lockdown corner. He won that game for them the week before against Dallas, shutting down Des Bryant, had an interception. And how about Landon Collins?
Yeah.
A dark horse for the Defensive Player of the Year. He does it all. He hits the quarterback. He gets interceptions, tackles, forces fumbles, great in coverage. He's the most dynamic player in the entire NFL when it comes to secondary, in my opinion. I like them a lot. There's not a lot of flaws with this Giants team other than their running game, but I don't know that they need a running game because we've seen Eli Manning just carry the team on his arm before in the playoffs. I don't see why you can't do it again. For my cold team, I'm going with the Indianapolis Colts, and here's why. 2 years ago, they were in Foxborough for the AFC Championship game, and they were one of the youngest teams in the NFL, led by Andrew Luck, and they had a great young coach in Chuck Pagano, and their future seemed so bright. They lost that game, but it seemed like they had a bright future. Since then, the Colts organization has plummeted this team. Jim Irsay has no idea what he's doing. They're a very dumb organization, and they have dumb draft picks, and here they are in one of the worst divisions in football, a division where you could make it in the playoffs. You could have clinched the playoffs with 10 wins 2 weeks before the season ends, and here they are. Not only are they not going to win their division, they might finish third behind Tennessee as well. They're not doing anything well, and I really worry about this team, especially they're wasting a young career of Andrew Luck, who's one of the best young players in the NFL. It's hard for me to watch because it should be so easy for them, but they're just not doing anything right.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we talked about Antonio Brown having to carry the load. Take a look at T.Y. Hilton. He's had a phenomenal year. This is a guy who's regularly going to get 20 to 25 targets a game. They have no one behind him. Philip Dorsett was a first-round pick, expected to turn out. He's looking like a bust. There's no one behind. They have a good run game with Frank Gore, and impressive Frank Gore late in his career. But T.Y. Hilton is the most valuable player to this team, and he's going to get hurt given the amount of workload he's been given.
I mean, I agree, and it's a shame, like I said, talking about Luck. I mean, you look back last year, they spent all that money on Andre Johnson. He's out of the league now. I mean, it's a bad franchise, and there are some franchises like the Pittsburgh Steelers, New York Giants, the New England Patriots, who are just so smart and they know what they're doing, and you have the Colts who, they get a great player in Andrew Luck, a cornerstone, a real true franchise player, and so far they've been really wasting his career. So now the final discussion, we're going to talk about the NFL MVP. Earlier this year, when you and I talked, I had Brady, you had Matt Ryan. We were spot on because really I think it's down to the two of them at this point. So you like Matt Ryan, why?
I think Matt Ryan is the most impressive player this year and the most important player to his team. This is an Atlanta team that has surprised everybody. They weren't supposed to be that good. Now they have a two-headed rushing attack behind Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman, but that's not what to talk about. Matt Ryan got it done again last Sunday. Playing without Julio Jones, missed the last 2 games with turf toe. Mohamed Sanu, guys behind him, Taylor Gabriel caught 2 touchdowns. It doesn't matter who's catching passes for Matt Ryan. He's proved that he is the man in Atlanta, and he can lead a team that's not so good defensively to constant wins given his natural ability.
Yeah, I mean, I think Matt Ryan this year has really impressed a lot of people because he's a guy who had sort of been labeled as not quite a bust, but on his way to sort of being there just because he'd been in the league and he's had some good teams, but he falls apart in the playoffs. This year, people were sort of saying it's going to start to go downhill for him. He's played fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Has the best numbers of any quarterback in the NFL this year. I'm still going to stick with Brady just because he changes this New England team so much. They were 3-1 without him, and he comes back, and they go off. And here they are. They're 12-2, tied for the best record in the NFL. And it's not the statistics that he does. It's watching him play games. His numbers will not dictate how good or how bad he plays. Yesterday in Denver, Tom Brady has a winning record in just about every stadium against every team in the NFL, but not in Denver. He has played horrible there throughout his career, even dating back to last year in the AFC Championship. So what did he do? He said, I'm going to commit to running the football. I'm going to hand it off. I got 3 good running backs, Blunt, White, and Lewis. I'm going to give them the ball, and when I need to throw, I'm just going to do what I got to do. I'm going to throw short dump-offs to Edelman. Just pick up 3-4 yards when you need to, not try and force the ball downfield, not hang on to it for too long. And he said, my defense is playing well against a pretty bad offense. I'm just going to let them do their thing. I'm going to run the clock, and he got the win. That being said, his numbers are not bad, considering his numbers compare to most NFL quarterbacks this year. Even Derek Carr is in the discussion. Brady and Carr's numbers, Brady's almost got better numbers than him. Carr's got 3 more touchdowns. Brady's played 4 less games than him. So he's, I think, the best player in the NFL this year. And unfortunately, you and I have sort of discussed this. The NFL MVP, it's kind of a deceiving award because it doesn't really go to the guy who's most valuable to the team. History has shown it sort of just goes to the best player. And in my eyes, I think Tom Brady is the best player.
All right. So we take a look at Derek Carr, and a reason that his numbers couldn't be that good is you have to remember he's playing with 2 broken fingers the last 2 games. He has gone purely out of the shotgun. He cannot take snaps under the center, and that's a little deceiving. It's unfortunate for him, but he still comes into San Diego. He still gets a win against a Chargers team who should not be taken for granted. This is a team that they don't have the record to show it, but they constantly are in games. They don't quit in games. They have trouble in the fourth quarter. Phillip Rivers, experienced quarterback. Derek Carr got it done. I think Derek Carr is still firmly in this race as well.
I think he's in the race, but I know the injury, it's an unfair reason, but unfortunately an injury can be something that can derail your MVP campaign. He's a great young quarterback, and he's got a great career ahead of him. I just don't think this is his year. I think Brady's still going to hang on to that throne. If he doesn't get it, I think Matt Ryan's very deserving as well. So I think that's all the time we got today. Scotty, thanks for joining me once again. This has been Matt Schlegel with my partner and colleague Scotty Luntz for Beyond the Whistle. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon.